Is,
Hi, everybody. I'm Amelia.
hi. Hey, where we are.
Here we are. And this week we're launching into what's commonly referred to as the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew. So Tom will tell us the story, in quotes, from, well, it is in a narrative setting, yeah, from Matthew 5, verses 1 to 12.
So when Jesus saw the crowds and his disciples came to him and he taught them, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who are merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for so also the people treated the prophets who came before you."
Thanks, Tom. There you have it. Okay, so we
Yes.
do begin these 3 chapters of teachings with a narrative setting. And Jesus goes, what's it say, up on a mountain?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And who's the audience that he has? There's 2 different groups mentioned.
Well, it's first of all the crowds, and he saw the crowds, and then the disciples came. So it's really both the crowds and the disciples, though the disciples are named as those, I don't know, kind of closer to him, who he called together. So the picture is of the 12 disciples gathered around him, and then these crowds that had come to hear his teaching.
Yeah, and it says that he sat down to teach. So I was trying to imagine this, and then I thought, well, I had this picture of like the feeding the 5,000, these huge crowds. How are they ever going to hear him if he's sitting down, with 12 disciples around him?
Well,
we don't worry about that.
Well, the hillside on which the Sermon on the Mount is traditionally located is very steep. And so I remember when I was there that, I could have sat on the top of the hill and had people, sitting on, it wouldn't have been all that comfortable for this long speech to stand on this relatively steep hill. On the other hand, they could sit there and turn and see him. So it's feasible.
It's feasible. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Jesus is talking to his disciples and the crowd. Who is Matthew's audience Matthew's telling this story about Jesus? Who is his audience?
Well, his audience he addresses the audience almost always as Judeans, as Israelites, who are then people from Galilee, from around Nazareth, from around Capernaum, where he was living. So it's located on the Sea of Galilee, and Matthew is, constructing this story for, I think, gatherings of Hellenistic Israelites in the region of the Roman Empire. So he's addressing the community of Israel, and then also Gentiles who may be on the boundaries of the community.
Okay, so Jesus begins his teaching with this list of ways in which people will be blessed. A couple of things about the language. We call this list the beatitudes.
Right.
And where does that word come from?
Well, it's a word that has its origins in Latin. It means blessings.
Okay, blessings.
So it's a synonym for blessings.
Right. So secondly, I've seen translations that don't use the word blessing. They say happy are those. What do you think about that as a translation?
Well, it captures a little bit more of the sense of joy associated with this, but it's not as good as blessings, because blessings come from God. There's the sense of God's initiative and spirit, driving this, and that these pronouncements of blessings are also what I call performative. And that means that the words themselves do what they are talking about. They are blessings that are conveyed by the very speaking of these words. And that what Jesus is doing is blessing the people. So I think blessed is still the best translation.
Okay. Now, the Gospel of Luke also has a list of blessings. Right. Is that also at the very beginning of well, it's not on a mountain. It's on a plain in Luke, so we call that the Sermon on the Plain.
Right.
And they're kind of different. So we want to talk about any of those differences, or?
Well, he came down with them and stood on a level place, so that in Luke, it's the Sermon on the Plain, on the level place, and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. So there is a sense in which there's a larger crowd in Luke. And just, for these blessings, they are, blessed are you who are poor, yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you and exclude you, and so on. And then, but woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. So they're very different in the Beatitudes in Luke than in Matthew.
Matthew doesn't have any woes, right?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
So then one of the differences, yeah, okay. Matthew has the poor, blessed are the poor in spirit. He adds in spirit, right? So Luke just has blessed are the poor.
Right.
Do you have any sense of why Matthew, I don't know, added that? Because that does change it certainly changes the meaning in my mind.
Well, I think that Matthew is trying to convey the same meaning. Poor in spirit, that is, those who have the spirit of the poor, but it's a larger category. The poor then would significantly exclude those in Jesus' audience who are well-to-do, who are middle class. They didn't have a middle class, but who are people who had some money, who weren't poor. So I think it is to make it more inclusive. And it's also to describe that what he is focusing on is a spirit of being poor, a
Or
spirit of
poverty.
poverty and
Okay.
humility and so on.
Yeah, that's a little different than economic poverty.
It
Spiritual
includes
poverty.
economic
Yeah.
poverty.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right.
Okay. Now, Jesus also talks about blessings of the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
Is that is that going to happen now? Is that in the future? Or is it both? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's both. It's just grammatically both. Blessed are, that is now,
Mhm.
the poor in spirit, for theirs will be the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be. So there is in each of the Beatitudes, there's a statement of what is now, that is blessing, and the various kinds of blessings that are named for different folks, and that there will be a fulfillment of those blessings in the kingdom of heaven in the future.
Okay, to ask specifically about one of these blessings, the one that has to do with the meek. Sometimes that word's, I don't know. What does that mean in Greek or what?
Well, in English, it often has the associations of being weak. Meek, weak,
Or not speaking up and
not
speaking
speaking up.
your mind or your opinion, especially I think with regard to women, it's been a problem.
Right.
You know.
So the value of being of not saying anything, of
Yeah.
accepting whatever.
Right.
That isn't its
Accepting things
meaning
you
here.
shouldn't really have to accept,
Right.
I guess. Yeah.
Right. Meek means in the Greek it means gentle, humble, unassuming, considerate. I think it also means, I remember a speech of a LSU coach who came to Earlham, who said that part of the meaning of meekness was a sober self-assessment, a self-assessment that was not proud or trying to assert things, but was rather confident, strong, but gentle, not imposing on.
It might be in contrast to arrogance.
Yes.
It occurred to me.
Yep.
If you think about the opposite of arrogance,
Yes.
might be to be meek. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now righteousness. It says those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. How is Jesus using that word righteousness? Is that
Well,
personal piety or social justice or what?
Well, I think it's both. We tend to think of righteousness as personal piety, as personal achievement of being good. But it does carry with it the virtues of justice. Righteousness and justice are synonyms. And so righteousness includes justice in a way that we often do not think of that term as being as including justice, including righteousness for the larger community as well as for individuals.
Now 2 days ago was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and I would certainly think of him as a person who hungered and thirsted for righteousness.
Right. For righteousness to become then a characteristic of the world, of the nation.
And in particular, he worked at the United States being a more righteous culture, society. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Then what are the implications of these beatitudes? I mean, we're kind of moved naturally into this question for ministries of peace and justice.
Well, the Beatitudes are a condensation of the virtues that are associated with the kingdom of God, with the kingdom of heaven, as Matthew calls it, as Jesus calls it in Matthew's gospel. And so the source of ministries of justice and peace is in these qualities, in these energies. And so to focus on the righteousness associated with identification with the poor, of identification with the meek, in the sense of the humble, those who are not arrogant, the various virtues that are described in the Beatitudes. Each of them is a quality that has in it the energy of the kingdom of heaven, and therefore the energy of ministries of peace and justice. So it's no coincidence that one of the last of the Beatitudes is, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." That is, they are the descendants of the spirit and energy of God. And so this ministry of peace and justice is a ministry that grows out of these energies that are described so beautifully in ways that have had enormous impact of the virtues of the people who are addressed and who are blessed by Jesus' blessings on those. And it calls forth an invitation to every listener to examine themselves as to in what ways are they, living out of that spirit.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about how it's a list of virtues to cultivate, as well as in some cases just simply comfort. Think of those who mourn, or
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
Right. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Have a good week. And
All right.
in your prayer time, you might reflect on these virtues that Jesus lifts up.
And how you're receiving these blessings that
yes.
that are present now, as well as will be fulfilled in the future.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Bye-bye.
A week of blessings.
Oh.